Sarah Chen released a tired sigh as she pulled her Tesla Model X into the parking lot of Beverly Hills' most exclusive shopping district. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pristine sidewalks, where perfectly manicured palm trees swayed gently in the California breeze. After 14 hours of back-to-back meetings, she had promised herself a small reward. A new handbag from Maison de Luxe, the newest and most talked-about luxury boutique in the area. At 34, Sarah had built herself into one of the most respected investment bankers on the West Coast. The daughter of Chinese immigrants, she had worked her way through Harvard Business School, graduating at the top of her class before landing a prestigious position at Goldman Sachs. Now, as a managing partner at her own investment firm, she handled portfolios worth billions of dollars. Today had been particularly exhausting. She had closed a major deal that would merge two tech giants, creating thousands of jobs in the process. Her casual attire, worn jeans, a simple black sweater, and comfortable flats reflected her long day. Her usually perfectly styled hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she had removed her makeup hours ago during a brief break between meetings. As Sarah walked toward the boutique's elegant facade, she could see several shoppers inside, all being attended to by eager sales associates. The store's window display showcased the latest collection of handbags, including the limited edition piece she had been eyeing for weeks. It was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, with hand-stitched leather and gold hardware that caught the light beautifully. Before entering, Sarah checked her phone one last time. There were 3 missed calls from her assistant and numerous unread emails, but they could wait. This was her moment to treat herself, something she rarely did despite her success. Her mother's voice echoed in her head, reminding her of the value of hard work and humility, principles that had guided her throughout her career. The heavy glass door swung open silently, and Sarah stepped into the luxurious interior of Maison de Luxe. The boutique was everything one would expect from a high-end retailer: marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and meticulously arranged displays. The air was perfumed with an expensive fragrance, and soft classical music played in the background. 2 sales associates stood near the entrance, engaged in what appeared to be an important conversation. Madison, as her name tag indicated, was a tall blonde woman in her mid-20s, wearing the store's signature black dress uniform. Her colleague, Blake, was similarly dressed, his perfectly pressed shirt and tie reflecting the store's attention to detail. Sarah noticed their eyes flicker toward her as she entered, followed by a quick exchange of glances between them. Neither moved to greet her, despite the store's reputation for impeccable service. She made her way to the handbag display, her experienced eye appreciating the quality of the craftsmanship before her. The limited edition piece she wanted was displayed on a higher shelf. Sarah looked around for assistance, making eye contact with Madison, who quickly looked away and continued her conversation with Blake. Their whispers and subtle glances in her direction didn't go unnoticed. A few feet away, another customer, a woman in an expensive designer dress and obviously fake tan, was being shown various items by a third sales associate. The contrast in treatment was becoming increasingly apparent. Sarah stood patiently, her years of dealing with difficult corporate negotiations having taught her the value of maintaining composure. She watched as Madison and Blake moved to help other customers who had entered after her, their behavior making it clear that she was being deliberately ignored. Victoria, the store manager, emerged from the back office. She was an elegant woman in her 40s, carrying herself with the air of someone who had spent years in luxury retail. Sarah observed as Victoria took in the scene, noted her presence, and then engaged in a quiet conversation with Madison and Blake. What these employees didn't know was that Sarah Chen wasn't just any customer. She had purchased millions of dollars worth of merchandise from the brand's New York flagship store over the years. Her personal shopping assistant there had even sent her photos of this specific limited edition piece before it was released to the public. But here she stood, being judged by her casual appearance and ethnicity, in a store that prided itself on exclusivity and exceptional service. Sarah reached for her phone, opened the camera app, and began discreetly recording. Years of fighting subtle discrimination had taught her to document everything. Little did the staff know, their behavior was about to lead to consequences they never expected. Madison leaned closer to Blake, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the glass counter. "Just another looky-loo," she whispered, casting another sidelong glance at Sarah. "Probably taking pictures to copy the designs." Blake nodded in agreement, adjusting his designer glasses with an air of superiority. The luxury boutique had been particularly busy that afternoon, with several high-profile clients making substantial purchases. Victoria, the store manager, had been carefully tracking their sales figures, knowing they were close to breaking their monthly target. She had no time for what she assumed was a window shopper. Sarah moved gracefully between the displays, her trained eye noting the exceptional craftsmanship of each piece. Despite the staff's obvious dismissal, she maintained her professional demeanor. As an investment banker, she had faced similar situations before, boardrooms full of men who underestimated her, clients who questioned her capabilities based on her appearance. "Excuse me," Sarah called out politely, trying once again to get assistance. Madison and Blake exchanged another meaningful look before Madison reluctantly approached her, maintaining a careful distance as if Sarah might somehow taint the merchandise. "Yes." Madison's tone was cold, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Can I help you?" The emphasis on help carried an unmistakable note of condescension. Sarah pointed to the limited edition handbag on the upper shelf. "I'd like to see that piece, please." Her voice was steady and clear, carrying the authority of someone used to commanding boardrooms. Madison's lip curled slightly. "That particular piece is quite expensive. Perhaps I could show you something more suitable." She gestured toward a display of smaller, less expensive items near the entrance. At that moment, a well-dressed woman in her 50s entered the store, dripping in obvious designer wear. Blake immediately rushed to greet her, leaving Sarah standing there as Madison quickly excused herself to assist her colleague. Victoria, who had been watching the scene unfold, approached Sarah with a practiced smile. "I couldn't help but notice you've been here for quite some time," she said, her tone falsely pleasant. "We do have other customers waiting for assistance, and this is a very exclusive boutique. Perhaps you might be more comfortable shopping at one of the department stores in the mall." Sarah raised an eyebrow, her phone still discreetly recording in her hand. "Are you suggesting I leave?" she asked calmly, years of negotiating multi-million-dollar deals evident in her composed demeanor. "Well," Victoria replied, her smile tightening, "we do cater to a certain clientele. The piece you're interested in is $58,000, and we wouldn't want to waste your time." The other customers in the store had begun to notice the interaction, some watching with uncomfortable expressions, others pretending not to see. Madison and Blake continued attending to their preferred customers, occasionally throwing smug glances in Sarah's direction. Just as Sarah was about to respond, the boutique's door opened again. This time, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s entered, his tailored suit and commanding presence immediately drawing everyone's attention. James Morrison, the senior vice president of global retail operations for the luxury brand, had arrived for his surprise store inspection. Victoria's face lit up with recognition and mild panic. She turned away from Sarah, ready to greet her superior, but froze when she heard his next words. "Sarah Chen." James called out warmly, his face breaking into a genuine smile. "I didn't expect to see you here in Leh. How are the renovations going on your Park Avenue apartment? I trust Jerome has been taking good care of you at our New York flagship." The color drained from Victoria's face. Madison and Blake stopped mid-conversation with their customers, their expressions shifting from smugness to horror. The boutique fell silent except for the soft background music. Sarah turned to face James, a small smile playing at her lips. "James, what a pleasant surprise. I was just trying to get a look at the limited edition piece Jerome told me about." She gestured to the bag on the high shelf, the same one Madison had deemed too expensive for her. James's eyes narrowed slightly as he took in the scene before him, the recording phone in Sarah's hand, the stunned expressions of his staff, and the obvious tension in the air. As one of their most valued global clients, Sarah Chen spent more on a single shopping trip than most people made in a year, and his staff had just made a terrible, terrible mistake. James Morrison's presence in the boutique had created a palpable shift in the atmosphere. Victoria's hands trembled slightly as she watched her superior greet Sarah Chen with the warmth and respect reserved for their most elite clients. Madison and Blake stood frozen, their previous arrogance replaced by growing dread. "Let me get that piece for you myself, Sarah," James said, moving toward the display. His movement broke the stunned silence that had fallen over the store. As he carefully lifted the limited edition handbag from its perch, he continued, I remember when the designer first showed us the prototype. I immediately thought of you, knowing your appreciation for exceptional craftsmanship. Victoria stepped forward, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor. Mr. Morrison, I can explain. She began, but James held up a hand, silencing her mid-sentence. Sarah, he said, placing the handbag on the viewing counter, I apologize, but I couldn't help noticing you were recording something on your phone. May I ask why? His tone was gentle but carried an undercurrent of concern. Sarah placed her phone face up on the counter, the recording still running. I've learned to document certain situations, she replied calmly. Would you like to review the last 15 minutes? Her question hung in the air like a sword. Madison's face had turned an alarming shade of white. Blake tugged nervously at his collar, while Victoria looked as if she might be sick. The other customers in the store had stopped pretending to shop and were openly watching the scene unfold. James picked up the phone and pressed play, the boutique filled with the recorded voices of his staff, their whispered comments, Madison's condescending tone, and Victoria's thinly veiled suggestion that Sarah shop elsewhere. With each passing moment, the recording painted a clearer picture of their discriminatory behavior. When the recording ended, James placed the phone down carefully. His face had hardened, the friendly demeanor replaced by the stern expression of an executive who had built his career on maintaining the brand's prestigious reputation. Sarah, he said, his voice heavy with sincerity, on behalf of our entire company, I want to express my deepest apologies for this inexcusable treatment. This is not what we stand for, and there will be immediate consequences. Victoria stepped forward again, this time with tears in her eyes. Ms. Chen, if I had known who you were. That's precisely the problem, Sarah interrupted, her voice firm but controlled. The issue isn't that you failed to recognize me as a VIP client. The issue is that you and your staff felt it was acceptable to treat anyone this way based on their appearance and perceived ethnicity. The other customers had begun to whisper among themselves. Several had their phones out, discreetly recording the confrontation. Sarah knew from experience that social media would soon be buzzing with accounts of what had transpired. James turned to face his staff. Victoria, please gather your team in the back office. We need to have an immediate discussion about this incident. His tone left no room for argument. As Victoria, Madison, and Blake shuffled toward the back office, their shoulders slumped in defeat, Sarah picked up the limited edition handbag. She ran her fingers over the exquisite leather, appreciating the artistry that had gone into its creation. I'll take this piece, James, she said, but not because I need to prove anything to anyone. I'll take it because it's beautiful, and because I hope this incident leads to meaningful change in how your staff treats all customers, regardless of how they look or what they're wearing. James nodded solemnly. I assure you, this will be addressed at the highest levels of our organization. We've been working to implement better diversity training, but clearly, we have much more work to do. As Sarah prepared to complete her purchase, she noticed several of the other customers approaching her, expressing their support and sharing their own stories of similar experiences. What had begun as a simple shopping trip had transformed into something much more significant, a moment that would force one of luxury retail's biggest names to confront the uncomfortable reality of bias within its walls. The afternoon sun was beginning to set outside the boutique's windows, casting long shadows across the now quiet store. But for Sarah Chen, this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a larger conversation that needed to be had. In the elegantly appointed back office of Maison de Luxe, Victoria, Madison, and Blake sat rigidly on the leather sofa, facing James Morrison's stern expression. The air conditioning hummed softly in the background, doing little to ease the tension that filled the room. Do you understand what you've done? James asked, his voice carrying the weight of decades in luxury retail. Ms. Chen isn't just any VIP client. She sits on the board of 3 major luxury brands. Her investment firm manages portfolios for half of Hollywood's A-list celebrities. Last year alone, she spent over $2 million at our New York location. Victoria's hands twisted in her lap. Mr. Morrison, if we had known. That's not the point. James cut in sharply. Let me show you something. He pulled out his tablet and opened a social media app. Already, several videos of the incident were circulating online. One post, shared by a customer who had witnessed everything, had gained thousands of retweets in just 30 minutes. Madison's face crumpled as she read some of the comments. The hashtag Maison de Luxuricism was trending, with people sharing their own experiences of discrimination in luxury retail. What had started as a routine afternoon in the boutique was rapidly becoming a PR nightmare. Meanwhile, in the main showroom, Sarah continued her shopping with James's personal assistance. Other customers had gathered around her, creating an impromptu support group. A well-known actress, who had been quietly shopping when the incident occurred, approached Sarah. "I filmed everything," the actress said, showing Sarah her phone. "Would you mind if I shared it? People need to see this. It happens too often, and it needs to stop." Sarah considered the request carefully. As an investment banker, she understood the power of public pressure in forcing corporate change. "You can share it," she decided. "But please make it clear that this isn't just about one store or one brand. This is about a systemic problem in luxury retail." Back in the office, James was making phone calls to corporate headquarters. The company's PR team was already scrambling to address the situation. Posts about the incident had reached major news outlets, and reporters were beginning to gather outside the boutique. Blake, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. "We never meant. We didn't think." He trailed off, unable to finish his sentence under James's stern gaze. "That's exactly the problem," James replied. "You didn't think. You saw someone who didn't fit your preconceived notion of a luxury customer, and you made assumptions. Do you know what Ms. Chen did before coming here today? She closed a $5 billion tech merger. She was wearing casual clothes because she'd been in meetings for 14 hours straight. Victoria's makeup had started to smear from her tears. Her perfectly curated image of authority had crumbled in the face of her own prejudice. Will we be terminated?" she asked quietly. James stood up and straightened his jacket. "That decision will come from corporate. But right now, I need you all to leave the premises. We're closing the store early today. Security will escort you out through the back entrance to avoid the media." As the 3 staff members gathered their belongings, James received another urgent message. The company's CEO wanted to speak with Sarah personally. The incident had escalated far beyond a simple case of poor customer service. In the main showroom, Sarah was completing her purchase. The limited edition handbag, along with several other pieces she had selected, would be delivered to her office. She had no intention of carrying shopping bags past the growing crowd of reporters outside. James returned to find Sarah surrounded by supportive customers, many of whom were sharing their contact information with her. The incident had created an unexpected solidarity among the shoppers, transcending the usual barriers of wealth and status that often divided luxury retail clients. "Sarah," James said, approaching her with his phone in hand, "our CEO would like to speak with you. She's deeply concerned about what happened here today." Sarah nodded, knowing that this conversation would be crucial in determining how the company would address not just this incident, but its entire approach to customer service and racial sensitivity. As she prepared to take the call, she couldn't help but think about how a simple shopping trip had turned into a catalyst for what she hoped would be meaningful change in the luxury retail industry. The next morning, Sarah Chen sat in her corner office overlooking downtown Los Angeles, watching as the incident at Maison de Luxe dominated the morning news cycle. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing since the previous evening. Calls from journalists, social media notifications, and messages of support from people around the world. Elena Martinez, her assistant, entered with a stack of newspapers. "You're on the front page of the business section," she said, laying out the papers on Sarah's desk. Headlines screamed, "Luxury boutiques racial profiling scandal and investment banking power player exposes high-end retail discrimination." Sarah's video call with Margaret Thompson, the CEO of Maison de Luxe's parent company, had lasted 2 hours the previous evening. Unlike many corporate damage control conversations, this one had been surprisingly genuine. Margaret had shared her own experiences as one of the few female CEOs in luxury retail and had listened intently to Sarah's suggestions for systematic change. "Miss Chen," Elena interrupted her thoughts, "the morning news shows are all requesting interviews, and there's a call holding from Good Morning America." Before Sarah could respond, her phone lit up with a text from James Morrison. "Turn on CNN. Victoria is doing an interview." Sarah grabbed the remote and switched on the wall-mounted television. There was Victoria, still wearing her designer clothes but looking considerably more humble than the day before. Tears streamed down her face as she spoke. "I want to publicly apologize to Ms. Chen and to anyone else who has ever faced discrimination in luxury retail," Victoria was saying. "What I did was inexcusable. My actions weren't just unprofessional, they were deeply prejudiced, and they reflect a bigger problem in our industry." The camera panned to show Madison and Blake sitting beside her, both looking equally contrite. Madison spoke next, her voice shaking. "We judged someone based on their appearance and ethnicity. We were wrong. So wrong, and we're grateful that Ms. Chen exposed this behavior because it's forcing all of us to confront our biases." Sarah's phone buzzed again, this time with an email from Margaret Thompson. The company was announcing a comprehensive overhaul of their training programs and hiring practices. They wanted Sarah to head a newly formed advisory board on diversity and inclusion in luxury retail. Elena appeared again at the door. "The Vogue editor-in-chief is online too. They want to do a feature story on you, not just about the incident, but about your journey from an immigrant family to becoming one of the most powerful women in investment banking." Sarah leaned back in her chair, thinking about her parents who had worked multiple jobs to put her through school. Her mother had once been turned away from a luxury store in San Francisco, told that the prices were probably out of her range. Now, 20 years later, her daughter was in a position to help change that narrative. The television continued to buzz with commentary. Retail experts were discussing the broader implications of the incident. Other luxury brands were rushing to announce their own diversity initiatives. Social media was filled with stories from people sharing similar experiences, using the hashtag that had now gone viral. Lake's face appeared on the screen next. "We've all received termination notices, and we understand why, but Ms. Chen's actions have opened our eyes. We're enrolling in diversity and sensitivity training courses, and we hope to use this experience to educate others in the retail industry." Sarah's phone lit up with another message, this time from her mother. "I saw the news," it read. "You did good, daughter. You stood up not just for yourself, but for all of us who have ever been made to feel less than worthy." Looking out over the city skyline, Sarah realized that what had started as a simple shopping trip had sparked a movement. The luxury retail industry, long criticized for its exclusivity and subtle discrimination, was being forced to confront its demons. Elena appeared once more. "The corporate office sent over the limited edition handbag you wanted, along with a personal note from the designer. And there's a group of young women of color in the lobby. They're all young professionals, and they're asking if you would mentor them." Sarah smiled, reaching for her jacket. This was no longer about a handbag or a single incident of discrimination. It had become something much more significant. A chance to create lasting change in an industry that desperately needed it. As she headed toward the lobby to meet her unexpected visitors, she knew that the real work was just beginning. 1 week after the incident, Sarah Chen stood at the podium in Maison de Luxe's corporate headquarters in New York. The company had organized a press conference to announce major changes in their organizational structure, and Sarah had been invited to speak as the newly appointed head of their Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Board. The grand conference room was packed with journalists, industry leaders, and civil rights activists. Cameras flashed as Sarah adjusted the microphone, her composed demeanor masking the significance of the moment. Behind her sat Margaret Thompson, the CEO, along with other executives who had flown in from around the world for this announcement. "What happened to me at the Beverly Hills boutique isn't a unique story," Sarah began, her voice clear and steady. "It's an experience shared by countless others who have been judged not by their character or capabilities, but by their appearance and ethnicity. The difference is that I was in a position to do something about it." Margaret Thompson stepped forward to announce the company's comprehensive action plan. The changes were sweeping. Mandatory diversity training for all employees, revised hiring practices to ensure diverse representation at all levels, and a new customer service protocol that would eliminate bias in customer interactions. In the audience, Victoria, Madison, and Blake sat quietly. Though they had lost their jobs, Maison de Luxe had offered them an unexpected opportunity. If they completed an extensive diversity training program and showed genuine change, they would be considered for positions in the company's new inclusion initiative, sharing their story to train others. "We're investing $50 million in these changes," Margaret announced. "But more importantly, or investing in a complete cultural transformation. Ms. Chen has shown us that luxury isn't about exclusivity. It's about excellence in how we craft our products and treat our customers. As Sarah listened to the announcements, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Jerome, her personal shopper at the New York flagship store. "You've started a revolution," he wrote. "Other luxury brands are scrambling to examine their practices. Change is happening." The press conference continued with questions from journalists. One reporter stood up. "Ms. Chen, you could have simply exposed this incident on social media and walked away. Why did you choose to work with the company instead?" Sarah leaned into the microphone. "Because real change doesn't come from public shaming alone. It comes from working together to address the root causes of discrimination. This company showed genuine remorse and a willingness to change. That deserves support." In the weeks following the incident, Sarah had received thousands of messages from people sharing similar experiences. Many luxury brands had reached out, asking for her advice on their own diversity initiatives. The incident had sparked a broader conversation about discrimination in high-end retail. Victoria raised her hand from the audience, and Sarah nodded for her to speak. "Ms. Chen," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "your grace in handling this situation has taught us more than any training manual could. You've had every right to demand our punishment, but instead, you chose to create an opportunity for education and growth." The room fell silent as Sarah responded. "The goal was never punishment. The goal was change. Real, lasting change that would prevent others from experiencing what I and so many others have faced." As the press conference concluded, Margaret Thompson made one final announcement. The company would be establishing a scholarship fund in Sarah Chen's name, supporting young people from underrepresented communities who wanted to enter the luxury retail industry. Later that evening, as Sarah prepared to leave the building, she passed the company's flagship store. Through the window, she could see a diverse group of customers being helped by an equally diverse staff. A small change, perhaps, but a significant one. Her phone buzzed again, another message from her mother. "Your father would have been so proud," it read. "You turned a moment of discrimination into an opportunity for transformation." Sarah smiled, thinking about how a simple shopping trip had evolved into something so much more meaningful. As she walked to her car, she passed a young woman of color being warmly welcomed into the store. The woman's eyes widened with recognition, and she mouthed a silent thank you to Sarah. This wasn't the end of the story, Sarah knew. It was just the beginning of a larger movement toward genuine inclusion in an industry that had long prided itself on exclusivity. And she was ready to lead that change, one store at a time. 3 months after the incident, the changes at Maison de Luxe had begun to show remarkable results. Sales had increased by 30%, with a notably more diverse customer base frequenting their stores worldwide. The company's transformation had become a case study in corporate responsibility and inclusive business practices. Sarah Chen sat in her office, reviewing the latest report from the Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Board. The document detailed the progress made. Over 2,000 employees had completed the new training program, hiring practices had been overhauled, and customer satisfaction scores had reached all-time. Alina entered with her morning coffee and a stack of fashion magazines. "You're featured in all of them this month," she said, spreading the magazines across Sarah's desk. The covers showcased Sarah's story, with headlines like "The Woman Who Changed Luxury Retail" and "Breaking Down Barriers in High-End Fashion." A video call notification popped up on Sarah's computer screen. It was Victoria, Madison, and Blake. After completing their intensive training program, they had become unexpected allies in the fight against retail discrimination. They now traveled to stores across the country, sharing their story and training staff on inclusive customer service. "Ms. Chen," Victoria began, her face showing genuine enthusiasm, "we just finished our 100th training session. The response has been incredible. Store managers are actually requesting our program now, not just accepting it as a requirement." Madison chimed in. "Yesterday, a sales associate broke down crying during our presentation. She said she'd been guilty of the same behavior and never realized the impact it had on customers. It's like people are finally waking up." Blake added, "Other luxury brands have started reaching out. They want to implement similar programs. Your story has created a ripple effect throughout the industry." Sarah nodded, remembering how different things had been just 3 months ago. The incident that could have ended in bitter litigation had instead sparked a movement for positive change. The scholarship fund established in her name had already received thousands of applications from young people eager to enter the industry. A knock at her office door interrupted the call. It was James Morrison, who had been promoted to Global Chief of Diversity and Inclusion at Maison de Luxe. "Sarah, you need to see this," he said, holding up his tablet. The latest market research showed that Maison de Luxe had become the most trusted luxury brand among diverse consumers. Their commitment to change had transformed their image from exclusive to inclusive, without sacrificing their high-end appeal. "The best part," James continued, "is that other brands are following our lead. The entire industry is changing. Yesterday, 3 major luxury houses announced similar initiatives." Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Margaret Thompson. "Turn on Fashion Network. They're doing a special report on the transformation of luxury retail." The television showed scenes from Maison de Luxe stores around the world. Customers of all backgrounds were being treated with equal respect and attention. The special featured interviews with shoppers sharing positive experiences, a stark contrast to the discrimination that had once been commonplace. "We're not just selling luxury items anymore," one store manager said in the report. "We're selling an experience that everyone deserves to have, regardless of how they look or what they're wearing." Elena appeared again with more news. The Harvard Business Review wants to feature the company's transformation in their next issue. And the diversity training program has been nominated for an Industry Innovation Award. Sarah looked at the framed limited edition handbag hanging on her office wall, the same one she had tried to purchase on that fateful day. It had become a symbol of change, reminding everyone who visited her office that one person's stand against discrimination could transform an entire industry. Victoria's voice came through the video call again. "Ms. Chen, we're scheduled to train the staff at the Beverly Hills boutique next week. Would you consider joining us? Your presence would make a powerful statement." Sarah thought about it for a moment. Returning to the store where it all began would complete a circle, not as a wronged customer seeking revenge, but as a leader helping to shape a more inclusive future for luxury retail. "I'll be there," she replied, knowing that her presence would serve as both a reminder of past mistakes and a symbol of positive transformation. As she ended the call, Sarah reflected on how a moment of discrimination had led to unprecedented change. The luxury retail industry was evolving, and she had helped pave the way for a more inclusive future. But there was still work to be done, and she was ready for the challenges ahead. 1 year after the incident, Sarah Chen stood before a packed auditorium at the Global Luxury Retail Summit in Paris. The annual event had chosen Inclusion in Luxury, the new standard, as its theme, and Sarah was delivering the keynote address to industry leaders from around the world. The transformation that had begun with one uncomfortable afternoon in Beverly Hills had grown into a global movement. Maison de Luxe's innovative approach had not only restored but enhanced its reputation. A year ago, Sarah began, scanning the attentive faces in the audience. "I walked into a store wanting to buy a handbag. Today, I stand before you celebrating a year of remarkable change. But this isn't just my story anymore. It belongs to everyone who has ever felt unwelcome in a luxury space." In the front row sat Victoria, Madison, and Blake, now respected diversity consultants whose training program had been implemented by over 50 luxury brands. Their personal journey from discrimination to advocacy had become legendary in the industry. Margaret Thompson joined Sarah on stage to present the latest industry statistics. Customer diversity had increased by 300% across luxury retail. Sales had surged, proving that inclusion was not just ethically right but also good for business. The scholarship program under Ms. Chen's name has already helped 100 young people from diverse backgrounds enter our industry, Margaret announced. Many of them are already working in management positions at top luxury brands. The Beverly Hills boutique, where it all began, had become a model store for inclusive luxury retail. Its staff now reflected the diversity of its customers, and it had the highest customer satisfaction ratings in the company's global network. James Morrison stepped up to the podium to share another announcement. "Today, we're launching the Luxury Industry Inclusion Coalition," he said. 25 major brands have already joined, committing to maintaining the highest standards of inclusive customer service. Sarah watched as representatives from various luxury houses signed the coalition agreement on stage. The document pledged resources, training, and commitment to maintaining diverse and inclusive spaces across the luxury retail sector. During the lunch break, Sarah received a video call from her parents. They were watching the summit's livestream from their home in San Francisco. "Your father and I never imagined that our daughter would change an entire industry," her mother said, tears of pride in her eyes. The afternoon session featured a panel discussion where Victoria, Madison, and Blake shared their experiences. Their story of transformation had become a powerful testament to the possibility of change. "We were wrong," Victoria said to the audience. "But through Ms. Chen's grace and leadership, our mistake became an opportunity to help transform an industry. Today, we train people to recognize and overcome the same biases we once held." The summit concluded with an award ceremony. Sarah received the inaugural Changemaker of the Year award, but she used her acceptance speech to honor others. "This award belongs to every person who has ever been judged by their appearance rather than their character," she said. "It belongs to the store employees who embraced change, to the executives who committed to transformation, and to the customers who trusted us to do better." As the evening drew to a close, Sarah's phone buzzed with a message. It was from a young black woman who had recently visited the Beverly Hills boutique. "Today, I walked into the store wearing jeans and a t-shirt. The staff treated me like a queen. Thank you for making this possible." The message reminded Sarah of why the past year's work had been so important. What had started as a personal incident had grown into something much larger, a fundamental shift in how the luxury industry viewed and treated its customers. Back in her hotel room, Sarah opened her laptop to find thousands of social media posts about the summit. The hashtag Inclusive Luxury was trending worldwide, with people sharing stories of positive changes they'd experienced in luxury retail. As she prepared for bed, Sarah thought about the limited edition handbag that had started it all. It still hung in her office, not just as a fashion accessory, but as a symbol of how one moment of discrimination had led to industry-wide transformation. The next morning's agenda would bring more meetings, more initiatives, and more work toward maintaining the changes they'd achieved. But for now, Sarah Chen could rest knowing that her experience had helped create a luxury retail industry where everyone felt welcome, regardless of how they looked or what they wore. The end of this story marked the beginning of a new era in luxury retail, one where true luxury meant not just exceptional products, but exceptional treatment for all.